In this video we're going to learn about images, and in particular the thumbnail images that you can put in the person boxes in your family tree. We'll start by loading up one of the samples, and if we go into the tree designer we'll see this has already got images. If you don't see any images in this sample, then it means that you haven't downloaded local copies. So if you go to the File menu and select Localize Images, that will download my internet copies and create shadow copies on your computer in the working directory. And that illustrates a need for something called place keys. This is a fundamental concept in SVG family tree generator. It means you can keep a single reference to an image, and that will reference both a local one and the remote internet one depending on the context. So let's go to the Place Manager on the Tools menu. The second one of these you can ignore, that's just for some of my stock images. But this is a user-defined one. You can have as many place keys defined as you want, and they can be recursive. If you're an advanced user, it means you can define one in terms of others. And that's got or illustrates another advantage, because if you change the location of your images or other resources, then it means you only need to change the place key definition. You don't need to go around every entry in your family tree and adjust those references. So that place key has two definitions. There's the internet version, which is a HTTP URL, and that's the place where my public images are stored. And then the second is the local directory version, and / is just a Windows shorthand for your current working directory. If you wanted to, you could make that explicit. On the right click menu you can add local directory, and once you've navigated to a directory you just hit save and it will change it. To illustrate what this means in reality, let me show you a small picture. Okay, this little diagram is illustrating that central reference to stanton_william.jpg uses a place key. The $pix : in front is a reference to a place key called pix. The dollar and the colon are just part of the syntax to differentiate it from a normal reference. When we're in the tree designer and we want a local file for efficiency, then it gets translated to that example in the upper box, and when it's deployed to the internet then it gets translated into a URL, which is illustrated in the lower box. But in the family tree there's only one reference. It just gets treated differently in those two contexts. Something we didn't point out in the Place Manager is that you can ask it to tell you what the translation of these would be. In this instance it doesn't really mean that much because we've only got one level of translation, and the same with the local one. But if you had got one place key defined in terms of others, and you can do this to a depth of 5, then it's a useful way of seeing the full expansion. So that was just a point I'd missed in the earlier part of this demo. If we look at one of these persons, the top right hand corner of the person box is where you would set the image. Now this is using a local image, which is the default for the tree designer, and the first thing to set when you're picking one is the place key, and we've only got one really relevant place key there. Once that's defined, then you can select the browse button and pick one of your images, and this is the one that we were using, and we won't bother changing that. If you hover over it, then it's actually showing you the local location, the actual file name, the full file path of that image. And it's useful to verify that both copies exist before you deploy your family tree. That means the local copy and the remote copy. Most family trees are going to be deployed on the internet, which means either a website or a blog. So you want to make sure that it's all going to work before you deploy it. So if we untick the local, that's now going to ask it to use the remote internet version, So you can see that's a little bit slower. It has to download it from the internet, and that works fine. So we can confidently release this, and hovering over it shows that it's now using an HTTPS reference rather than the local computer reference, and it's so much quicker if you use the local one. Now, before you actually start editing all the persons in your tree and adding thumbnail images, one thing you will need to do is to change one setting, and that's this number in the top right corner. It's a proportion of the person box that is going to be used for an image. By default it's 0, which means you won't see any images even if you've attached them to the persons. It's a decimal between 0 and 1, or a percentage, which amounts to the same thing. So that's saying the top 65% of the box is going to be used for an image. That tends to be about the right number if you're using a small font. If you're going to be using a larger font, then you might want to reduce the image down to something like 60%. It's really a case of try it and see, because it's not an exact science. One related topic I want to discuss is the application for expanding images. Let's remove the other applications because they're not relevant at the moment, so I'm just going to include the one that automatically expands an image. Regenerate the HTML for this and view it in the browser. So it looks pretty much as we've done, and now those place references are all translated into URLs so that it works perfectly on the internet. By default in the browser you can right click on an image. This is Firefox, but this is similar in the other browsers. View image. Now that's done two things. It's superseded the tree. It's done placed this on top of it, and the tab has really just got the file name, which doesn't really help you identify the person. It all depends on what file name you've chosen. Oops, I didn't mean to drop that. If I go back now to the tree and just click on the image, that's opened the image in a separate tab, and you can see the tab name now has the name of the person. That's actually the caption that you used in your tree, so it's as meaningful as you want it to be. But notice it's separate from the tree, and I can open other ones. So I could open all of the people there and I would get a separate tab for each one of them. So I'll clear this down, and there's just one more thing I want to mention. I'm going to switch trees to show you something else. I don't need to save those changes. Tree Ashby. Because as well as the thumbnail images, it can also be used in the notes. If we edit the case of Mary Ashby, we can see there that there's a normal HTML reference to an image, but it's using photos as a place key, a shorthand for the full location. Now, if we view the output as it would in the browser, then it's translated that to a URL reference. And although it's not using the local version, that's the advantage of that, is that if you change your location, the image location, then you've only got to change the definition of the place key. And there's another place where they get used, which is on the Program Data tab for the Compendia application. This Program Data looks better if we edit it with the tabular editor, so edit articles and image references. And that's a set of titles and URLs for web pages, blog posts, documents, PDF documents, say on the internet, or images, whatever references you can find on the internet for that person. These are using the basic HTTP URL reference, but you could put a place key in there, so that's another instance where they can be deployed. So we've covered all of these now. all of the places where place keys are used and the reason why they're there, so we'll wind this video up now.